If there's one thing I've learned about when someone passes away, it's not so much about the person who has died, but more about the people who are left behind. It's a time for them to gather together, whether it's to grieve or to celebrate the life of the one that once was, with hugs, tears, and keeping their spirit alive through bittersweet storytelling, leaving us with memories to cherish and to hold on to. But sometimes, the stories make us laugh, and that can be extremely healing. One of my favorite storytellers, because I thought he was so funny with his delivery, my Uncle Paul, he transitioned from this life last week. He decided that he didn't want a public service, and I'm not sure if I would have been able to make it back home for the funeral anyway had he had one, but I have had hundreds of people reach out to me with condolences, just absolutely beautiful sentiments. That, to me, spoke legions to who he was. I'm sure a lot of them would have loved to have gathered to honor him, but since we won't be gathering together in person, I decided to share some stories about him today because it will provide solace for me in sharing them, and maybe it will provide comfort for those of you who knew him as well. Today's episode is a testament to my Uncle Paul, Ode to the Colonel. It was a tradition for everyone in the family to meet up at Grandma and Grandpa's on Friday evenings. I can only remember a few times that there was a family function when my Uncle Paul wasn't in attendance. That would be when he went into the service during the late 70s into the early 80s, as well as over the last few times that I was able to go home to Indiana for family visits. The reason he was not in Indiana was because he had gone out to Colorado to help my Grandpa Spence's sister, Janelda, with some stuff she needed assistance with on her property. And since he would be out of town during my visits to Logansport with my mister, he offered for us to stay at his place and generously let us use his car. As laid back as he was, he always seemed to be making himself useful to others. He was a man of service. A few of the ways he helped my family was when my mother passed away. I had already moved to California at that point, and she and my father were still living in Indiana. It was the hardest thing I would ever have to face, for she was my very best friend. But something that made it even harder was seeing how her death broke my family. And I just couldn't bear to see my dad go through that kind of pain, having been with her since they were like 18 or 19. My Uncle Paul had spent a lot of time at their house. They were pretty tight. One of the reasons he was there so much, though, was because if they would travel, my uncle would stay with their Weimaraners, Nicky and Coney. Well, one night during the couple of weeks I had been home for Mom's celebration of life, I want to say it was either the night before or the night of the service, a lot of the family were standing around in the kitchen at my mom and dad's house. We were exhausted. And my Uncle Paul started telling stories, stories that I had never heard before. And the guttural laughter that came from our beings was the most healing part of the experience. And I'm going to share some of them to the best of my memory's ability with you all right now. It's been almost 20 years, but here we go. Uncle Paul is the baby of the family, and the next one up from him is my Aunt Georgie. I think they were in high school or just out of high school when this happened. And if I remember correctly, they were driving their parents, my Grandma Pauline and Grandpa Spence, from Indiana to Arkansas for guess what? Another family funeral. It was for my Grandpa Spence's brother's wife, Vivian. But this family funeral was a bit different than what we're used to attending today, because the family would be paying their respects in the home of the deceased. The wake was actually being held at my great-uncle James's house. I don't recall if Uncle Paul or Aunt Georgie knew of this beforehand, due to what I'm about to tell you. Uncle Paul said he was driving, and I could be wrong, but I thought he said Aunt Georgie was in the front seat with him, while Grandma and Grandpa were conked out in the back. I think he said upon their arrival they were driving up a gravel driveway to the house, so he was trying to be quiet by driving slow, because it was late at night and he didn't want to wake anyone up who might be sleeping in the house. Well, as they got closer to the house, and I'm not really sure how it was lit in order for them to see it, but they realized that the coffin was sitting in the window. So it was like a shrine of the deceased. It's rarely practiced these days, but I guess it's a distinct Southern long-standing custom referred to as sitting up with the dead. After a loved one has passed, the body remains in the home and is never left alone. At least one family member or friend sits awake with the body at all times until they are buried. He and Aunt Georgie, with eyes wide open and jaws dropped, looked at each other like, "Hell no, we are not staying in this house tonight." He looked back and saw that Grandma and Grandpa were still sleeping, so he quietly put the car in reverse, backed slowly down that gravel driveway, and tried to make their escape to find someplace else to stay late that evening. Well, I don't think they made it too far because, and although he didn't mention a family member sitting up with the dead, he did say the next morning when they woke up that there was a cat sitting on the head of my deceased great Aunt Vivian, licking her face and cleaning itself. Ugh. Well, I guess the rest of the family had already made their way down to Arkansas, and they were all congregating at Uncle James's house. My Uncle James was showing off some of his guns to the men in the family. And while the rest of the family were sitting in the living room, suddenly a rat, not a mouse, but a rat ran across the floor. And my great Uncle James whips out one of those guns and turns and shoots that rat dead right there in the middle of the family circle. I guess it scared the shit out of everybody. Yeah, I guess so. They said that they had never seen anyone shoot anything inside their own house. But Uncle Paul said that that wasn't the biggest surprise he'd ever seen. I don't know if it was at this same house or Great Aunt Alita's house or somebody around those parts. But he said that he was sitting with family or friends in somebody's front room, and out of nowhere, a deer had popped up from behind the couch. And I was like, "What in the world? What do you mean? A deer? Like Bambi?" And he said, "Yeah, I guess they had a baby deer who had hurt its leg, so they bandaged it up and had it resting inside the house behind the couch. Nobody knew it was there until that deer popped up and scared the bejesus out of everybody. They had a pet deer, y'all, in the house. What in tarnation kind of family do I come from?" We were screaming, laughing. And that was when I realized that the roots of my family were as country as all get out. But that laughter was the beginning of our healing, and I am so grateful for it. I would still have to leave my family, though, to come back to my reality that took place far, far away from them. I did not want to leave my dad in Indiana in what would now become that big empty house. But I didn't really have a choice because I had responsibilities and commitments and bills to pay back here. So after a few weeks, I did come back to LA. But my Uncle Paul, he did not leave. He basically moved into that big old house where my mother once dwelled alongside my father for the next couple of years. He was more than a brother-in-law to him. He was my father's brother. And I know his presence helped nurse him back from an empty shell to the man I always knew him to be, so full of life and love and laughter. And I appreciate him taking care of my daddy like that. So my Uncle Paul stayed with my dad in that big house, where, according to my Uncle Paul, my mom never left. There was a living room with a beautiful baby grand piano in it, with all of my mom's favorite pictures of the family sitting on it. She loved that room. And because they loved spending time in there, they hung a TV above the fireplace with two recliners sitting in front of it. And on the floor in front of them were two big pillowy dog beds where Nicky and Coney, the Weimaraners, would rest before going into their crates at night. The routine would go like this. Every evening, my parents would sit in those chairs until they would fall asleep watching their favorite television shows. The dogs would wake them up to let them know when it was time for them to go to bed. Then, they would turn off the TV, turn off the lamps, and head upstairs to their bedrooms after putting the dogs in their crates. Well, I don't remember if my dad was out of town on business or if he had gone up to bed already, and this was right after my mother had passed. But Uncle Paul had fallen asleep in front of the tube in one of those chairs, and the dogs did not wake up Uncle Paul. He woke up on his own, and the dogs were still laying there. So, he turned off the TV, he turned off the lamp, and he went to grab a drink of water from the kitchen before he came back to wake the dogs up to take them to their crates. Well, when he came back into the room, the lights were on, and he said to himself, "I could have sworn I turned that lamp off." And he said, "I thought it was so weird." And I went back to turn that lamp off, and I happened to glance down where the lamp would be plugged in, and the lamp appeared to be unplugged. The lamp was on by itself. That may have been why the dogs didn't wake up. They may have felt her too. And I believed him because there was not a soul that I knew that didn't walk into that house without feeling my mother in it. It was a pretty big property that my parents owned, and my uncle took over some responsibilities in taking care of it since my mother had passed. And from what I hear, this was around the time everybody started calling my uncle the Colonel. I guess he was pretty bossy. He wanted things done a certain way, and he wanted it done when he wanted it done. And he was the only one who knew how to do it. Maybe that's where I get it from. But bless his heart, I guess one day he was doing some cleaning, and he decided that all of the candles in the house were dusty. So he collected all of them, put them in the dishwasher, and let it run. Well, he didn't do it on a cold cycle. So all the candles melted and went down into the bottom of the dishwasher. Needless to say, they had to get a new dishwasher. You know, he just wanted to take care of people, and he did. Although I knew of some of the loves he had had during his existence, he was never married. When he found out later in his life that he had had a daughter, he wanted to know her, and he wanted to help her in the best way he knew how. And when she had a baby boy, he wanted to help him, and he did, in the best ways he knew how. I hope they know, if they don't know now, all that he went through to raise them up to be the best human beings that they could possibly be. He loved them dearly, as he did anyone that would allow him to. When I lived in Malibu, I had this coffee crew of guys, and we'd meet up every morning just to shoot the shit at the Trancas Starbucks. It was Steve, the guy who built everything, a couple of Tonys, Braden, Scott, and a man you may all recognize from Breaking Bad or the Better Call Saul series, that badass character that we've all come to grow and love, named Mike Ehrmantraut. Am I saying that right? You know, the hitman. His real name is Jonathan Banks. In the few years I had lived there, they had become my brothers. They were like angels to me. I shared these stories with them, and they were like, "You need to write a script because this is some funny and interesting shit." Well, I never got around to writing the script, and I'm sure there are way more stories like this that I could tell. I only wish my Uncle Paul had been the one to share them with the crew. He would have fit right in, because, PV, you too were an angel. And although I don't have a Starbucks to toast to you today, I do believe Rumplemints would be your choice of libation if you were here to join me. So that's how I will toast you. And if anybody else would like to join me, grab yourself a shot while I read the Colonel's obituary to you. Paul Edward Vaughn of Logansport, Indiana, passed away peacefully on Thursday, October 16th, 2025. Paul was a proud United States Marine, honorably serving his country from 1976 to 1982. He is survived by his loving daughter, Sarah Vaughn, grandsons Mikkel Vaughn, Malachi Vaughn, Ethan Vaughn, and Mikkel Cook, sisters Elizabeth, who's married to my uncle David Higgins, Linda, my mom's twin, who's married to Larry Stevens, and Georgie Mock, whose significant other is Steve Phoebus, and brother-in-law, my dad, Mike Rands. Paul was preceded in death by his parents, Spence and Pauline Vaughn, his brother, Keith Dean, and sister, my mom, Glenda Rands. A man of generosity and service, Paul graciously bequeathed his body to Indiana University School of Medicine Anatomical Educational Program. At his request, there will be no public service. A private military burial will be held at a later date. Paul will be deeply missed and lovingly remembered by all who knew him. Uncle Paul, I hope you left this time and space feeling the love we all felt for you. You are appreciated more than you will ever know. You set a great example for all of us. Well done, PV. Cheers, and peace out. Oh, I couldn't even finish it. How did you do? Oh, I love you, man. We'll miss you.